Hey girls, Maria Menounos here, author of the Every Girl's Guide to Life. Want to know my best tips and secrets for organization, travel, weight loss, beauty, fashion, and everything else in between? Go to bing.com/Maria and pick up my new book, The Every Girl's Guide to Life.
You're listening to the AfterBuzz TV network, now the largest new media platform on the web, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment.
Very good, King Johnson.
From the AfterBuzz Studios in Los Angeles, California, and streaming live on Ustream, this is AfterBuzz TV for The Killing. Tonight's host is Paul Ashton. Joining Paul will be AfterBuzz co-host Catherine Tulick. We'll break down tonight's episode and get you all the latest The Killing news and gossip. If you'd like to buzz in on tonight's show, you can buzz us at 424-256-1729. That's 424-256-1729. And now, picking up where the show leaves off and the buzz continues, Paul Ashton.
Thank you very much, Rich, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to AfterBuzz TV for our first AfterBuzz coverage of AMC's new series, The Killing. We're coming in at episode 5, entitled Super 8. It is with a great regret that we haven't covered the first 4 episodes of this incredible series, but life throws its curveballs at us and we do our best, and here we are nonetheless, better late than never, for the 5th episode tonight. And it did sound rather hilarious to my ears hearing Rich say, for The Killing, with such enthusiasm for a show that is nothing short of dark and brooding and removed of all colour and life, really, which is what makes it so brilliant. But before I get carried away with just how damn good this new AMC series is, let me just remind you all that you did just hear Maria Menounos' beautiful and friendly voice at the top of the show, and please be reminded that her book is out there, The Every Girl's Guide to Life. It is her new book, and it is currently number 3 on the New York Times bestsellers list. That's right, number 3. And a really fine achievement. She's a great chick. You probably know her from Access Hollywood, NBC Today Show. We know her from around these walls as a producer and one of the minds behind AfterBuzz. And of course, it's not only a tribute to her that it's got to number 3 in the New York Times bestseller list. It's also a tribute to Kevin Undergaro, our glorious leader. And you know, there's a saying about behind every great man there's a great woman when they talk about great male political figures and leaders. And of course, in this case, behind every great woman there is a great man. And in this case, Kevin, because I know he played a big part in creating The Every Girl's Guide to Life. And it's really no surprise to me, knowing him as well as I do, or at least as well as I've got to know him after the last couple of years, that he was behind The Every Girl's Guide to Life, because there's no greater woman out there. There's no person, no man who knows more about the woman than Kevin, because he's such a big girl himself. So, ladies and gents, jump online, go to Maria's Bing page, just search it, go to your local bookstore, find out where she's signing, get Every Girl's Guide to Life. If you're a woman, buy it. If you're not a woman, buy it, and at least give it to your mum, sis, or girlf, or maybe you read it yourself and you might learn something about organising, because if there's anything Maria's good at, it's organising, and I'm sure there's a whole lot about that in there. Anyway, look, enough about Maria and The Every Girl's Guide to Life. Let's talk about Paul's Guide to the Killing. This is a new AMC series. Let's just have a talk about AMC and how they can't get it wrong. with Mad Men, yes, love it, brilliant. Breaking Bad, the two of them, perhaps the best two shows that have been on telly the last couple of years. I recently caught up with The Walking Dead, watched all 6 episodes of that in a matter of days, and was completely blown away by how they managed to turn a zombie focused series into just an incredible human drama, and I cannot wait for it to come back, I think, in November. They had a series called Rubicon that was critically acclaimed. I never got around to it. It didn't catch with the viewers, but was apparently brilliant. And now they've come out with The Killing. The Killing is based on a Danish television series called Forbrydelsen. Excuse my bad attempt at a Scandinavian accent. And is about the murder of a young girl in Seattle and the subsequent police investigation. And the way that the series is structured, I know that most of you out there listening probably are fans and are watching, but I'm just going to do this anyway because we haven't really come to the show yet, so please excuse me a little bit of time to paint the context before we get stuck into episode 5 itself. But The Killing ties together 3 distinct stories around this murder of the girl Rosie Larson, and a really effective ad campaign leading up to this by AMC, where you've got just the photo of young Rosie Larson, a beautiful young innocent-looking actress whose name is, excuse me one moment, not on my list right here. Anyway, she's just the perfect bit of casting. Reminds me a little bit of the actress who plays David Duchovny's daughter in California, not daughter, the young actress in Californication, not his daughter, but the one who is the daughter of his step, whatever. Anyway, if you've seen season 1, he sleeps with her unknowingly and she punches him in the face and it's very funny. Anyway, great ad campaign where you had Rosie's face and just who killed Rosie Larson across it. Anyway, so it brings together 3 distinct stories that focus around her murder that we get these flashes of in the opening minutes of the pilot as she's chased through the woods surrounding Seattle. And we have the 3 distinct stories around the murder include the detectives assigned to the case, Sarah Linden and Stephen Holder being the 2 main ones, the victim's grieving family, Mitch Larson and Stanley Larson, who are just so superbly well played, and then the suspects. And it so far has been nothing short of a gripping series. I had a funny incident this morning. My parents, they live in Australia, in Canberra, in Australia. My dad's British and he just loves his murder mysteries. And I spoke to him just early today for all Easter and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, hey, Dad, I've got this amazing new series for you to watch. I can't wait for it to come out. It's called The Killing. And he was like, The Killing, I've seen it. It's amazing. It's brilliant. And I was like, what, you've seen it? I didn't realize AMC was in Australia. And it isn't. It's just that he'd seen the Danish series that this was based on. He absolutely loved it. He's prepared to send it straight over to me. Anyway, look, I'll talk more about the show and the showrunner and some quotes from them and some of the and I've got a particularly interesting early review from Tim Goodman from the Hollywood Reporter to come to later. But let's move into where we're at in the series, because obviously we've come in on day 5 in terms of our AfterBuzz relationship with this series, so that we're going to be doing a total of 9 AfterBuzz shows on this, because there are, well, now it'll be 8 after this one left in, because it's a 13 episode season. And the way that they're doing it is that every episode is a day in the investigation, in the murder investigation. And I do find myself forgetting how everything that we're seeing in every single episode is packed into just one day. But that's something, it is so well laid and jam-packed that it has that habit of creeping up on you. So in the past few episodes, we've seen Rosie's parents beginning to deal with the fact that she's died, their guilt, her mother's withdrawal from the world, Mr. Larson's difficulties. He's experiencing difficulties with financially. We know he has a shady past, and we haven't yet seen him really release yet. in response to what's happened to him. I feel like he's been holding it in as the patriarch of the family. We've got Richmond, Darren Richmond, incumbent mayor, mayor challenger to the mayor of Seattle, whose campaign has been derailed since Rosie was found in the trunk of one of his campaign cars, and of course we know that he has a leak somewhere inside his walls, and the main focus has been on his two aides, Jamie and his lover Gwen. And then, of course, we've been building suspects, and the focus of the first few episodes really was some of Rosie's friends, down and outers, who were into a bit of drugs and that kind of thing. And there was the whole episode with the cage, where we thought that maybe something went wrong, but of course, Rosie's friend Sterling was merely down there just getting into having some fun with one of Rosie's dodgy ex-boyfriends, and it was a bit of a red herring. At the end of last episode, we came across, we discovered that there had been some letters exchanged between Rosie and her teacher, Bennett Ahmed. And we open with Sarah and Stephen grilling Bennett, coming and meeting him at school, and having a chat with him about his relationship with Rosie, because she was going to some kind of after-school community. He's a spokesman for the Seattle All-Stars, or a local basketball team, and Rosie had been going and meeting him there, and there is some kind of relationship between the Seattle All-Stars and Richmond's campaign, and they would sometimes use the campaign cars. Bennett defends himself as their relationship and letters being nothing but intellectual discourse, and seems pretty competent in his self-defense here. But there are developments later in the episode that leave us wondering just how honest he was being. Next, we cut into the Larson house, and we sort of see the effect that that this horrible crime is having. The parents are asleep, and the youngest of the boys sneaks into their room, steals some money, and goes out to buy some food, just to have some breakfast cereal, which at the same time is the breakfast cereal that Rosie used to eat, and of course the eldest of the two has now started wetting his bed, just obviously an expression of the stress that he's under, and the two boys both feeling a sense of neglect in these last 5 days, and feeling like they're not cared for in the same way, and of course that cereal then reappears beautifully later in the episode. There's a whole sort of theme running through this episode of to me of objects that represent certain things and hold meaning within them, and this the way that Mrs. Larson becomes just sort of encaptured by the cereal in the supermarket later in the episode, when Richmond comes along, and then he talks about blackberries and how they would remind him of his wife, who we know died in less than pleasant circumstances. And I found it very interesting that it was blackberries that they chose to use as the image that he can't escape when it comes to his wife, that he now sees everywhere. And blackberries and such berries, the plants that they grow on are much like weeds, aren't they? I mean, there's a sense of something, I don't know, weed-like anyway. I thought that was interesting, and even more interesting and more of a comment on Darren Richmond's character, that he then goes out and denies to Gwen having spoken to Mrs. Larson inside there after Gwen was pushing him to kind of utilize the relationship to try and to the benefit of their campaign. Anyway, that is later on in the episode. Darren Richmond meets Jamie early on in the episode down at the rowing sheds, actually, which he's maintaining this sort of insider relationship with Jamie, his informant, in order to try and flush out the the leak inside his office, and there was this absolutely glorious shot. I don't know if you saw it, from underneath one of the underneath the kind of, what do you call those things? The jetty. Underneath the jetty, they snuck the camera down under there and looked up through the wood and the foundations of the jetty underneath it, just on top of the water, looking to the jetty across the water where Darren and Jamie were standing, and it had them just perfectly framed in this little square of wood, had them framed there / trapped. And I feel like there was an overarching sort of theme to this episode. Super 8. I mean, it's about, obviously, not J.J. Abrams' upcoming film, which is going to be one of the big summer blockbusters. But this too it's named after a Super 8 film that, in that opening scene, Bennett gives to Sarah and Stephen that Rosie made because she was a budding filmmaker, photographer. She made this on an old Super 8 camera. And so I really did get this sense of people being framed, of seeing some of our leads framed in a kind of in a trapped kind of way. In terms of the jetty, you had in the top right hand corner, Richmond, Jamie sort of cornered in the section. There were a couple of other shots like that, and it seemed to me in stark contrast to the freedom of a lot of Rosie's collected images that we see in in the final montage that Sarah is pinning up on her police board. There are all these the migrating monarch butterflies, the sky, the open sea. And you know, we've been told several times that Rosie wanted to see the world and really sort of spread her wings, as it were, without meaning to push the metaphor too far. But so the whole episode, to me, this juxtaposition between freedom, openness, and all of our protagonists or antagonists who are trapped in some way, and slowly but surely we're finding out more and more about just how trapped they all are, and by the secrets that they're all holding. So they. Stephen and Sarah have a look at the Super 8 film. We see the monarch, the monarch butterflies, and then we have a little scene between Sarah and her fiance out as she's about to take him back to the what are they called? Airport. They're called airports. And he mentioned something really interesting about Sarah's past. He knows us. She asked him in a great quote, do you think it's really possible to know someone, to really know them, as she's sort of uncovering all these things about people in Rosie's life? And her fiance knows all about her, and that he should probably go ahead and cancel the family barbecue on Sunday because she probably won't be there. And mentioned something about, what are you putting, she says, are you putting her drawings up on your wall this time? And Sarah says this one doesn't draw, but there is a reference to her saying, "Well, I'm not doing that. I'm a different person now." And we get a sense that maybe Sarah is someone who's become a little bit obsessed with these cases in the past. In the past. We get a look at Mr. Larson's financial pressures. The roof to his second house that his wife doesn't know about needs fixing. People are cancelling their contracts, removalist contracts with the company just to stay away. Then his workmate finds Mr. Larson's eldest son's peed-on pants in the bin, which comes back later in quite a nice way. In the supermarket, we see Mrs. Larson stepping out for the first time in the last 5 days, where she's been spending a lot of time just sleeping in Rosie's room, depressed, and she sees someone she knows who turns away from her, ignores her. And then, of course, we have the scene with Darren Richmond that I discussed just earlier. Then we go with Jamie as he tries to make his way inside the current mayor's campaign by meeting with him at the mayor's golf course lodge club. And there's this wonderful, the mayor's such a pompous prick, and there's this great quote where he's talking about how some of his ancestors worked in the coal room before the club was built to the grandeur that it is today, and he says, "Don't tell me my people don't know what it's like to be black," in reference to the coal on their face. At which point, the mayor's aide, who is a black guy, gives Jamie some kind of pained look, which indicated perhaps how frustrating it must be listening to that mayor crap on the whole time. But Jamie plays it well. He doesn't drink, but he takes one for the team in this case, gets drunk, vomits in the toilet, at which point the mayor releases a bit of information about Utanus, and we find out that in fact it might have been Utanus, who is part of the union movement, who Darren Richmond needed to endorse him, but who had extracted some favors for her husband's plumbing business in terms of contracts for the city in an episode or two ago, so that maybe it was Utanus the whole time. Interestingly, before that little section is completed, there's a little scene where Sarah is sitting outside the police station, booking her flight home, her flight to Sonoma for the barbecue that she intends to make with her fiance, and we see Stephen, her partner, take some money in a yellow envelope from someone in a car before moving inside to the police station. He says in a following scene that it's money from winnings from blackjack, but there seemed to be something dodgy with it, and it is wonderful the way that these episodes seem to be structured. We as we move through the three different sort of storylines within the one story. They start longer and slowly become more and more contracted, and then the music and the sound design starts to pick up in intensity towards the end, and each episode's finishing with this sort of very percussively driven montage shots where sort of key visual information is revealed to us, and the last shot that we see of Stephen in this episode is of him being outside a house. Through the windows, we see an adult and maybe one or two children, I think. And he put something in the post box, and we see a number 8760 or something. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head what it was. But he put something in the post box, and I couldn't help but feel that was somehow related to the money, which he claimed were just blackjack winnings. But Sarah didn't seem to buy it, and I certainly didn't either. Excuse me while I take a sip of my soda pop rubbish drink. Enough sugar to get a kid high. Anyway, so, excuse me. Well, what happens next? Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Larson go to the morticians. They take a dress for Rosie to the mortician. And God, this mortician's a kind of a creepy individual. By the way, just because it's coming to my head, Catherine Tulich isn't here. You may be wondering why she's been so quiet. Catherine was planning to be here. Our good friend Catherine, who is a journo and a writer for the LA Times, Washington Post, couldn't make it at the last minute. Some Easter complications. But will hopefully be with us next week, as well hopefully Katie Page. But for the moment tonight, I'm flying solo, really branching out into new ground. But we're going just great. Anyway, back to the morticians. They've got this creepy guy. There's something just really odd about him, and the way that it's like he's trying to be comforting, but it's just sort of disturbing. And the Larsons have picked out a dress for Rosie to wear in her coffin, and he's always like, yes, I'm sure she'll look very beautiful in that. And then he's like, would you like to see her in it? And because it'll just take a minute. And they decide to say yes, and they wait. And that to me was just such a strange thing to think, because this is where my mind went, and maybe it's a bit, but I mean, so her body is in an adjacent room. This is at the morgue, obviously. They're the funeral directors, so they have her body ready for what is the funeral the following day. We know from the glimpses of next week's episode that the funeral is tomorrow, day 6, episode 6, that will be. And just the thought of this guy going into another room where your daughter's dead body is, and then dressing her in it. I mean, what is what is she wearing? I mean, currently, is she completely, is her, I mean, it's a corpse, but I just still would hate the idea of this, like, weird, freaky old man going, and putting a dress on the body of my dead daughter. I mean, is she wearing underwear? It was really kind of disturbing, and I didn't like it at all. I got the sense that Mr. Larson wasn't happy with it, but went along with it. I don't know. I guess it's just a nasty business death, isn't it, when this happens, and there's no two ways about it. There's all sorts of stuff that you got to deal with, and it was confronting. Incidentally, just before that, I've been reminded from my notes that just before that scene, Mr. Larson's work buddy, who found the Larson boys' peed pants, went into the Larson's house and made his bed for them and washed the clothes, and lets the young lad know that he's going to keep the secret with him, which was just a really lovely touch to see. That guy's, I think we're going to see more of him. He obviously knows about Mr. Larson's past. They perhaps work together in that context. And he has been throwing Mr. Larson this information, sort of dangling a bit of a carrot in front of his nose, this episode about having a relationship with the groundsman at the high school, and the groundsman telling him that the police are still snooping around there, so that perhaps that means they suspect someone there, as we know they do. And he says he offers speaking to his friend the groundsman about finding out exactly who it is they're talking to, and then giving Mr. Larson that information. And it seems like Mr. Larson's shady past involves being some kind of a standover man. Whatever it was, I think it involved illegality, violence, and perhaps even death. I think they're sowing the seeds here for Mr. Larson to be taking something into his own hands later on, which may become very interesting indeed. Then we see them in the car on the way home, and the first thing Mrs. Larson says is she looked pretty. At which point, and it's of course still raining, and raining all the time, as apparently it does in Seattle, but it's just such an important factor in this. In the energy and mood of this show, but I'll talk more about that later. And Mr. Larson pulls over at a gas station, says he needs to get some oil or something, and then locks himself in the bathroom. And this was really just for me the most extraordinary part of this episode. We see him for the first time really, really break down, and the groan that came from him in that first moment was just heartbreaking and really did bring tears to my eyes. Brent Sexton is his name, the actor, and he really brought it. I tell you what, it was a stunning moment, and he wasn't afraid. It was just filled with so much pain and authenticity, and they stayed on him really nicely in the reflection shot on the mirror, and then just swung slowly over to him and finished it in a close-up, and it was all one shot, beautifully done, very very moving. And I mean, that one of the things that they have absolutely got so right with this show, like so many other things, is really helping us feel the pain that these two parents are going through, and the guilt and the loss and everything that must be plaguing them. Then we see Gwen, Richmond's lover and campaign manager, chatting with this hot young director who's going to direct this commercial that Darren Richmond is shooting that night for his campaign to try and get things back on track. And we find out from the director, who's basically a sleazebag, that Gwen had sex with him in order to get him to do this commercial. She, of course, then has fired him by the end of the episode, and that evening had him replaced. But we do get to see just how she's willing to do whatever it takes to get what needs to be done. Political expediency is all that matters to this woman, and I still don't trust her. Even though Mutanus has been shown to be, by the end of this episode, guilty of leaking information, there's still something else about Gwen that will come out. We then come back in touch with Sarah and Stephen, who really start unraveling some new information in the case at this point in time. They're having a nice chat. I love this quote that Sarah said. There's plenty of women with poor judgment out there. I'm sure you'll get lucky, to Stephen, when he's trying to suggest that she's checking him out. And apparently he's been 6 months celibate, he says. I don't know what's going on there. There's definitely going to be more about his past unraveled within the next 8 episodes as well. Interestingly, in last week's episode, the little tweaker guy with the crazy hair, homeless kid, who was a suspect and had sex with Sterling in the cage, said something to him. Said something to Stephen as Stephen was interviewing him about him being not a tweaker as well, but on the it was a drug reference, and I think he recognized the user in Stephen Holder, and we there is definitely something about his shady past, and he does pull off that marijuana smoking to lure those girls into giving him the information he needs, although it's fake weed. I get a sense that he's done it before. Anyway, they grill the principal of the school, who finally gives them the information that Bennett Ahmed's wife, was a former student of his. And considering his relationship with Rosie that they're uncovering, this is, of course, of great interest, and leads them to Bennett's wife during the day where they talked. To Bennett's house during the day where they meet his wife, who is in fact pregnant and was a senior when he was 23 and a young teacher, and they then have got together and now have a house, and she's knocked up. And Sarah beautifully spins a little trap for him, saying about how she'd had a crush on her teacher, and they used to write notes to each other, which then sort of leaves the way open and for Bennett's Ahmed's wife to say that's exactly how the two of them got together, and he would write these notes to her about following your dreams, which is exactly, of course, what he had been writing to Rosie, which at the very least is damn creepy, and at the most potentially damning evidence. Sarah then snoops around the house and finds ammonium hydroxide, which becomes really the next key bit of potential evidence in this case. The cage and the blood on the wall 2 episodes ago was, or seemed to be at the time, a big revealer, and here we go, we're really going to find something out. Turns out that was not so relevant, it seems, to Rosie's death, but ammonium hydroxide might well be. As we now come into sort of really the, from this point on, the episode starts to wind up, and you really get this sort of percussive beat coming under it. We know that the scenes start getting shorter and faster and cutting between each other and between 3 stories in a sort of a cyclical way as we cycle towards our climax of the episode and its end. Jamie finds out what he needs to find out about the Uranus leak, and sends Richmond an express parcel, calls at the same time, and there's some coffee making guy who we had seen his face a couple of times during the episode. I hadn't noted him before, but they just dropped him in frame notably a couple of times, and if I'd been paying more attention, I might have picked up on that's what they were setting us up for. He immediately gets escorted out of the building by security, and Gwen is immediately pissed off because she didn't know that Darren had been doing this investigation behind her back. That is then, of course, compounded after Richmond confronts Uranus and with this information, and he plays this extremely well. And although they're working very hard to make us realize that he's a really good guy. Most notably, the scene in the supermarket where he doesn't want to use the Larsons as political ammunition, I suppose, and try and get them on side. We do see he is a man with ethics and integrity, or at least a man trying to maintain his ethics under a lot of pressure. It's a really one of the things that I really like about this series is them having this whole other layer. It's not just about the murder itself, but you're also seeing, this guy who is idealistic, who's described as idealistic and wants to make changes for the better, where he has to compromise certain things to get the job done. And does the means justify the ends in this case? I look forward to seeing how that particular debate unravels in the coming episodes. But of course, he despite the fact that he seems to be a man of integrity, we also see that he knows how to play hardball, and he does it very well with Eustace, sort of outing her, and but then making sure that he still is able to utilize her endorsement whilst threatening her with the kind of legal action that will keep her on side, despite the fact that he's now not going to be throwing Mr. Eustace any plumbing jobs ever again when he's mayor. We shoot back to the Larsons. Mrs. Larson comes home from the supermarket and sees her young lad in the bath that we saw her in the first or second episode, where she held her breath underwater to sort of try and put herself in her daughter's shoes, as it were, for those moments when she was trapped in the trunk. And I mean, that was an absolutely chilling and gut-wrenching scene, which, we in a way, we saw Mr. Larson's version of that today in the bathroom. But she comes into the bathroom and sees the water dripping from her son's hair onto the floor. And again, this is another kind of moment to me similar to the breakfast cereal in the supermarket, the blackberries reminding Richmond of his wife, and again we see the water, another element, another physical material thing triggering an emotional response for Mrs. Larson that just reminds her of Rosie and Rosie's death, and that is a really wonderful thing that I think you see in so many really great films and television, is the relationship between humans and their physical world, and the way that we invest meaning, and the way that certain objects hold meaning and memory and events within them, in the way that a song can transport you back in time to when you were 19 and at the Walkabout pub in London. If it's me, anytime I hear a couple of Crowded House songs, that may not mean anything to anyone, but in this case, just so many things obviously would remind you of your daughter, but just that was just a chilling scene, and you can really also see the effect it's having on the young boy as he doesn't understand what his mother's going through and how distant she's becoming, and a really thankless role as well for Mrs. Larson's sister, who's playing babysitter, and that actress doing just a really solid job as well. We then shoot over to the commercial that is about to be shot. It's a nice night shoot. There's Richmond, and we see that Gwen has fired the director because of whatever happened there. I wonder if that will come back later. And then we come into the autopsy, and again we have this lovely shot starting this scene outside the door frame of a nice wide of Sarah sitting on the desk asking the medical examiner about his autopsy. He's found no signs of drugs in her system, but what he has found is all over her hands ammonium hydroxide, which Sarah found in one of the rooms in Bennett Ahmed's house. And he tells us that ammonium hydroxide is used for cleaning flooring and bombs. I like that they threw the flooring in there. It demonstrates just some plausible deniability or possibility that it wasn't armored to create some doubt. But whoever killed Rosie has used ammonium hydroxide to clean stuff from under her fingernails. It is a very strong, obviously very strong chemical that not only can remove DNA materials obviously from her hands, but also can make the presence of or the evidence of sexual assault very difficult to find. So Sarah brings up the point that perhaps this is someone who really knew what they were doing. Perhaps has done it before, and if it is Bennett Ahmed, and we know that he has a history with students, well then maybe there are some other girls, and of course his wife was conveniently out of town with their car on the weekend, and he cancelled the workman to come in on Saturday, so that certainly implicates him in a fairly potentially damning way. Mr. Larson, quick scene, comes into his mate who's working on his car. He now wants to know who the cops are looking at the school from the groundsman. We then have the quick shot of Stephen that I mentioned earlier putting something in the postbox outside a house that we don't really know what it is. I think it might be something to do with that money. And then we come to our last shot of the episode, back at the commercial night shoot, Richmond, and he is standing arm in arm with Bennett Ahmed, obviously as part of the Seattle All-Stars local community basketball team that Bennett does some work for, and so we see that these two are joined, intertwined a lot more than we realized they were before. And no doubt that is going to create some interesting complications later down the track. So that brought the episode to an end, and as they have all been, it was gripping and layered. And with every episode, we find out more and more stuff about these characters that. It's just keeping you hooked for the next for next week. I can't wait. On that note, let's take a quick commercial break, and when I come back, we'll talk more about the series as a whole and look at this review that I've got.
Want to find out what the AfterBuzz is about?
Janice is a drama queen.
This is the divide that is going to carry the series.
Give us a call. 424-256-1729. 424-256-1729.
It's television, and they want it to be as dramatic as possible.
I mean, it's Shakespearean.
You never know what goes on behind closed doors.
Find out why AfterBuzz TV is the #1 source for after-show content.
Now, in the eyes of Jimmy, Nucky is a villain.
424-256-1729. 424-256-1729.
I mean, who would you guys rather hear that from? Your husband or your best friend?
The wig! The wig will come out.
When the TV show is over, get your AfterBuzz on.
All right, here we are back with me, Paul Ashton, flying solo tonight. I hope you're handling that okay. Our first AfterBuzz episode looking at The Killing, AMC's stunning new series. So we have here a great review by Tim Goodman from The Hollywood Reporter. He did a piece on this series just as it came out, and I just wanted to go through a few points about it as sort of a bit of an extended news and gossip, and also general introduction to the show, as this is our first kind of look at it. He says, the series is excellent, absorbing and addictive. When each episode ends, you long for the next, a hallmark of great dramas. With that out of the way, give credit to AMC for being unafraid to greenlight a series that moves slowly, lacks a lot of flash, and holds tight to the clues of a dark mystery. And this is absolutely true. He goes on to talk about Rubicon, which I mentioned earlier, not really catching on with viewers, though being critically thought of very highly by the critics. But this perhaps is has a different quality, moves slightly faster than that. But I mean, I think that's why a show like this works, and why those of us who are watching and you guys who are listening are into it. There's and for any of you who've watched The Wire or something like that, there is a series that rewards long viewing and the depth that they're able to go to by extending it, rather than the standard procedural, which focuses just on one crime per hour. Here we have 13 hours on the one crime, and I just think it's terrific. He goes on to say, based on the phenomenally popular Danish series For Breidelsen, which then became a hit in Britain, is being reworked in various other countries. The killing upends so many elements of American television that it immediately comes across as unique. And I guess that kind of follows on from what I was just saying. It's not the standard wham bam thank you ma'am. There's no result by the end of at the end of each episode. You just go deeper into the rabbit hole. And he goes on to say, set in Seattle but shot in Vancouver. Interestingly enough. There's a dark, damp, grey sheen visual style to the series that, like A Rainy Day, slows everything down. AMC said that there was an intentional Nordic noir feel to the location, and that's as true as any description. And if you've watched all the episodes, you will absolutely notice that that factor. And I absolutely love the way this looked. And the first thing I thought after watching the pilot, which actually I was fortunate enough to go to the premiere, the AMC premiere at the Harmony Gold Theatre with Catherine Toolett. She'll hopefully be joining us next week. She's because she's press and Hollywood Foreign Press, etc. She went along and we saw it together. It was a pretty low key event, but great to see it there. And the one thing that I noted was the moodiness of it, and this sort of ever present, overcast, rainy, dark. On those rainy days, and I always remember this, especially as a kid at school, those rainy days, the way that the feeling in the air, I think it's the positive ions in the air that come with that kind of weather. They make everything feel a bit weird. As kids, it always used to make you go a bit hyperactive. But they're just that presence and that oppressive sort of a presence of the weather is such a factor in this series. And he in fact goes on to, what does he say? A Nordic noir is perfect. He says that's as true as any description. As visually arrested as the greens and yellows in the yawning expanse of Breaking Bad's Albuquerque setting, only the opposite. Yeah, we all love Breaking Bad, and that's absolutely true. The killing makes Seattle, Vancouver, an essential character in the story. That's a really great way of describing it. The key decision in adapting the series for American television was not tampering with the quiet, stoic demeanor of the main character, Seattle homicide detective Sarah Linden, played with riveting austerity by Mirelle Enos. Now, I'm not sure how to pronounce her first name. Mireille Enos. And she is absolutely stunning. The absolute linchpin of this series. That's another thing that they've got so right with this, and it's the casting. Something I've noticed, really generally a flawless kind of thing with AMC. I hadn't really met many of these actors before on television, and although Muriel, I don't know, Murray, I don't know how she pronounced it. We'll find that out for next week. Has had a recurring role on HBO's Big Love. So if you've watched that, you will have seen her. I have not. But she is just so perfect in this role. It's breathtaking. And Tim Goodman goes on to say, hewing to the original, Enos plays Sarah as uncommonly quiet, solidly professional, intuitive without being, like American crime fighters, some kind of savant. It's not until you watch Enos play Sarah for a while that it sinks in. There hasn't been a female American character like her probably ever. That is one hell of a big rap. Chewing nicotine gum while trying to kick the habit is her most expressive trait. Yeah, and I love that that as a kind of that motif of her, this woman who's trying to stop something in her life. The cigarettes, yes, the Nicorette gum to try and deal with that, but what we're actually seeing is a woman who can't let go of something else, and it's this case. And despite her fiance and her impending wedding, knocking at the door the whole time, she can't let go of whatever it is that drives her to stay involved. Is it just her human compassion and empathy? Is it just her professional obsession, and is there something else that we'll find out about her later in the series that will explain more of this? But that gum chewing, that trying to kick the habit, that is how to describe, I think, what she's trying to do, and it goes, as I say, far beyond her smoking. He says, you can't take your eyes off Enos, who gives Sarah both a tough exterior but also a complicated emotionalism. Yeah, I totally agree, Tim. She's absolutely bloody amazing. He also gives big raps to Joel Kinnaman, who plays Stephen. This relatively unknown actor plays Stephen Holder, a former undercover narcotics cop promoted to take Sarah's spot on homicide duty. It's to Kinnaman's immense credit that he makes Stephen seem sketchy and too cocky in his presentation as a street-savvy undercover cop who talks like the young teens he's investigating. You don't know what to make of him, nor does Sarah, and as we found out tonight, nor do we, and I look forward to seeing what we are supposed to make of him. Billy Campbell plays Darren Richmond. I think he's doing a super job. It might have been a character, or that a network might have thrown to... thrown to 10 minutes. Yeah, right. What's the guy's on Brothers and Sisters, Jesse? Who plays and he plays young number two in Austin Powers. I've gone absolutely blank. Anyway, they could have thrown it his way. But Billy Campbell plays Darren Richmond. He's fantastic. And then the parents, Michelle Forbes, who's appeared in True Blood, and Brent Sexton in The Valley of Elah, are exceptional as Mr. and Mrs. Larson. What else have we got here? I do have also an interview. The showrunner of The Killing is Veena Sud, or Veena Sud, S-U-D. You would know her because she's just finished 5 seasons writing for CBS's procedural Cold Case, and I think she's an executive producer on that. And what do we have? This is what I can say about her. She said she was instantly drawn to this adaptation of the Danish series. I heard the phrase "The Killing" and I said, "I'm in." I love how dark and raw that title is, and ditto on the material. It was wonderfully addictive, great storytelling, and an awesome female lead. And the same can be said about this version. Entertainment Weekly did an interview with her that you can find online. I'll just throw you a couple of quotes from it right now before we wind up. Entertainment Weekly asked how close does this adaptation hew to the original series, and she says, our version of The Killing uses the original series foundation: 3 stories, 1 murder, 1 episode, 1 day. We took the framework of the original, which was phenomenal storytelling, and used some of the shorter arcs and the longer arcs in their storytelling, but started to just riff. After the pilot, it just started to kind of go off in its own direction. They ask, is the killer the same as in the original version? She says, we have a different killer. It's really really delicate house of cards, sustaining a mystery for 13 hours. Knowing that we weren't going to go to that same place that the original series did, we had to create our own twists and turns. So if you have seen the Danish series, or you have read about it, they have a different killer, which I think's damn great. And let me tell you, if there's one spoiler alert you would want to know that was coming, it would be, who is the killer to this? I would be devoted if I found out beforehand, because there's so much juicy anticipation to come. Will we get flashbacks to Rosie? No, you'll never see flashbacks. The only time we'll see the dead girl alive is in photographs or in the real thing, or in the real things you would have if someone passed away. That was a decision we batted back and forth a lot because flashbacks are so incredibly effective. I really wanted to be faithful to walking in the detective's shoes, so the detective never gets flashbacks. We gave ourselves that challenge. It's actually really hard. How do you create an affinity for this person you've never known? were you ever concerned about how dark this show is and people tuning in? No. I mean, I've always been drawn to dark material. Any sort of authentic experience is what we seek as TV viewers. I'm sure at one point ER seemed too dark and Homicide seemed to be too dark, but I think as long as you tell a true story, people will come. We do want real experiences and real connections, not artificial kind of closure and artificial endings. So that is absolutely true. We do want real experiences. We do want authenticity, and I'm absolutely thrilled with what they're delivering us so far on AMC's The Killing. They're absolutely leading up to that, and I just can't wait for more. So look, that brings me to the end of my little one-man show on for AfterBuzz TV, The Killing, Season 1, Episode 5, entitled Super 8. Thanks very much for sticking it out with me. I look forward to seeing how next week unfolds in this brilliant new AMC series, The Killing. I'm Paul Ashton. Thanks very much, Jesse. Ladies and gents, we'll see you next week, or why not join us on Tuesday night for Glee, which is back from hiatus. I missed last week, but I sure as hell can't wait to get back on board this Tuesday. Cheers, guys.
And just a little reminder, that was Robert Wagner, just for your information, who played number 2 in the show.
Oh no, but who plays young number 2? Young number, like he's the pin-up boy. Like in Brothers and Sisters, he played Kitty's husband. Like, I don't know why I can't think of his name.
Michael York?
No. Like, he's a super big pin-up. He's on this month's cover of some chicks magazine.
Oh, Rob Lowe.
Rob Lowe. Thank you. Sorry, people, but when you have a blank, you've got a blank. I was just saying, I thought Darren Richmond could have been, like, on network, they probably would have cast Rob Lowe as Darren Richmond, but I love that they've got our mate Bill Campbell. He's doing a great job. See you next week, people.
From producers Kevin Undergaro and Phil Svitek, engineer DJ Jesse Janity, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. If you have questions or comments, be sure to buzz us at info@AfterBuzzTV.com. And you can find us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter by searching for AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
Buzz you later.